Hello all. Just wanted to do a little video. I was amazed to find out how many of my friends either had never heard of the impact or the doctrinal issues with the shack, and then also with as many of my friends who actually like the book. I think it's amazing. I made the comment earlier that I wish that that Christianity in general, particularly in America, would have more of a theological foundation, so that we wouldn't be swept by some stuff like the shack. Um, it's just amazing that so many Christians can read a book like the shack and not see the implications or the theology behind what the author is writing. My biggest concern with it is the author denies foundational biblical truths. For example, and I think the biggest problem is his denial of substitutionary atonement. Substitutionary atonement is foundational to the gospel. The Adam and Eve fell in sin, and because Adam and Eve sinned, it became our nature to sin. We could no longer do right. Our bend was towards sin. Paul said that we were dead in trespasses and sins, and for the breaking of the law of God, we deserve to pay for those sins in hell for eternity. The almighty, holy, just God punishes lawbreakers in hell for eternity. Now, this is something that the author of the shack cannot agree with, and I'm aware of his tragic past, and I'm aware of his background, but nevertheless, when something like this gets into the church, and I see it everywhere. Many of the people in my church and even my mother, who work with other Christians, have been given the book to read, and it is amazing. But to deny the substitutionary atonement, the fact that God sent His Son to this earth not to be just a moral example or a good teacher, but to live a substitutionary life and live the perfect life that we could never live, that is required, not just the passive obedience of God, and that He doesn't do anything wrong, but the active obedience of God, of following God's will. He does nothing that is not of the will of the Father, even to the point of taking the cup of God's wrath. Jesus said, "Let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless not my will, but thine." It was an active obedience of God. And so His substitutionary life and substitutionary death, the death that I deserve on the cross. For my sins, Jesus died on the cross. The wrath, the just wrath that God pours out, which should pour out on me, He poured out on Jesus Christ instead. And this is the whole basis for the gospel. The only reason that I have any hope of not seeing just eternal punishment for my sin is because Christ justly atoned for my sins and fully atoned for my sins on the cross, and was vindicated by the resurrection. So to deny this is to deny the gospel. And there's so many things, and what the author is trying to get across is what's called ultimate reconciliation, or Christian universalism, that through Jesus all people will go to heaven. God is not mean enough to send, my God would never send anyone to hell, because my God's a God of love. But no matter how good we are, no matter what we've done on either end, how good or how bad, my God is loving enough, but my God is holy, and my God is just. Where Isaiah, the most holy man of Israel, when he got a glimpse of the glory of God and the holiness of God in Isaiah 6, he says, "Woe unto me." What he normally told the people of Israel, "Woe unto you," he said, "Woe unto me, for I am undone, I am disintegrated." And Isaiah later in chapter 53, describing the death of Christ, said that it pleased the Lord to bruise him. And maybe a more clear rendering of that is it pleased God to crush him, talking about Jesus Christ on the cross. And it is undeniable that it was God's will before the foundation of the earth. Jesus didn't come to live an example, bring social justice to the earth finally after all these years. No, it was God's predeterminate counsel and foreknowledge that brought Christ to that cross, as he was slew by the wicked hands of those murderous Jews and Romans. But it was on that cross that he made propitiation and expiation, that he took my place and I took his righteousness. And where God, when he looks at me, he no longer sees my sin, but sees my substitute, Jesus Christ, and his righteousness for me. And that is so vital to true biblical Christianity. That is the gospel. And when we lose that because of the way we feel, that we think God would be mean, or God doesn't live up to the standards that I make up for him, we lose God and we lose the gospel. So, after all this, to have a book that is supposedly describes the triune God of the Bible, disregard or dismiss biblical doctrine or theology because we don't understand God in the first place. No, the Shack is not a good book, and it may be well written, but it is not something that we should be reading for our understanding. May I recommend the book of Hebrews if we want to understand the gospel and the atonement. May I recommend the book of John if you want to understand the triune nature of God and how Christ's deity. So that is why I think the Shack should not be on the list of Christians' favorite books. Have a great day.